The 13th century marked a turning point in global geopolitics. For the first time since Alexander the Great, an Asian power not only changed the regional map, but also threatened the international order. The Mongol Empire, led by Genghis Khan and his descendants, stretched its claws from the Gobi Desert to the Danube, from the Central Asian grasslands to the Black Sea coast. With asymmetrical military power, unprecedented mobility, and the ability to destroy the state structure of its opponents in a matter of weeks, the Mongols became the nightmare of the entire Eurasian continent. However, by the second half of the century, their goal was no longer simply plunder and destruction. Under the hands of Kublai Khan, a ruler with a systematic mindset and imperial ambitions, the Mongol Empire was shaped into a pan-Asian political administrative machine. In 1271, he officially established the Yuan Dynasty, making Dadu, present-day Beijing, the capital, and at the same time inheriting the Mongol legacy with the ambition to expand southwards, the Southeast Asian region, which had never been subdued. In terms of geostrategy, Southeast Asia held a key position. It was the soft bridge between mainland China and the Indian Ocean, between the Land Silk Road and the maritime route passing through the Strait of Malacca. Whoever controlled Southeast Asia would have the power to control the flow of overseas trade and food, and at the same time, block any potential counterweight in the south. For the Yuan Dynasty, this was not only a place that needed to be subdued to complete the frontier, but also an inevitable step to close and protect the center of the empire. In that picture, Viet appeared as a stubborn barrier. Not as large as Dali, not as rich as Champa, nor as glorious as Pagan, but Viet had a crucial position right on the south-north axis, where the military and commercial corridor from southern China advanced to the Indochina Peninsula. The fact that this small country had maintained its independence since the 11th century had become a serious challenge to the Yuan dynasty's semi-pacification, semi-assimilation strategy. For Kublai Khan, any refusal, even a hesitation in paying tribute or avoiding the mission, was considered an act of rebellion that needed to be punished. In his eyes, Viet, a small country located next to the southern border of the empire, was a test of the ability to control the chain of buffer zones and the loyalty in the vassal system. But for Viet, the story was completely different. Under the Tran dynasty, this country, although young, had matured through many changes. Since the reforms under the Li Tran dynasties, Viet has gradually formed a unified state apparatus, with a professional army, an intellectual class attached to the government, and a spirit of national independence that was consolidated through generations of resistance against the Song and Champa. The Tran dynasty, especially the first kings such as Tran Tai Tong and Tran Than Tong, clearly understood that next to an empire like the Yuan, there were only two paths: absolute submission or complete resistance. And they chose the second path. So they rebuilt the military system, trained the army, and laid the foundation for a comprehensive defense system. In the dark, people like Tran Hongdao quietly grew up, carrying within them both the temperament of a military leader and the heart of a son of Vietnam. And when the Mongol envoy arrived, carrying an edict demanding Viet to pay tribute, submit, provide military and food support, the Tran court chose the harshest answer, which was not to kneel. On a late winter day in 1257, the Mongol army shook the southern rainforest for the first time. Leading the army was Uryankade, son of the great general Subotai, who had defeated the most skilled armies in Asia and Europe. This time, he and the Han general Aju Ai-Lu received orders from Kublai Khan, with the target being Viet, a small kingdom on the edge of the Yuan Empire's map. but a steadfast thorn that had never knelt. The campaign began when the Yuan army advanced south through Yunnan, crossing the border into Viet through Langson Pass, a dangerous route connecting the highlands and the northern delta. The main attack route went through Chaolang, attacking the Langsun, Bakjiang area, quickly penetrating the fragile defense lines of the Tran army located at the northeast border. After breaking through the defense line in Langchao, the Mongol army continued to pour into Bach, then crossed Kao River by temporary bamboo bridges, attacked Yenthe, Pulang Thuong area, now Bakjiang, then spread out in two directions. One direction followed Duong River to approach Thanglong from the east. The other direction followed the road to approach from the north through Tucson, Dong'an, using the familiar thunder tactic: attack quickly, destroy completely. The Yuan army advanced like a storm, combining heavy cavalry and long-range archers, dividing into small groups, attacking and then forming a siege. The Viet citadels from the border to the Midlands fell one after another in a few weeks. Finally, in early January 1258, Thanglong Citadel, the political heart of Viet, fell into the enemy's hands after a sudden and stormy attack. According to historical records, the Mongol army captured the citadel less than 10 days after crossing the border. Their victory was the result of extremely fast marching speed, a day of crossing dozens of miles of forests and mountains, combined with the initial confusion of the Tran army when faced with this unprecedented tactic. But that was when the real war began. The Tran court, under the leadership of Tran Tai Tong, along with the military spirit of Tran Hung Dao, did not choose the path of defending the capital to the death. They did not build high walls and deep moats, nor did not risk their lives to hold every inch of land. Instead, they abandoned Thanglong, as if handing it over to the enemy, a dangerous move in the grand game of chess. It was a grand game, where every move had been calculated. The capital was left empty, not a grain of rice to be taken, not a single civilian to be taken prisoner. Houses were burned down according to the empty house, empty garden strategy. Fields were abandoned, and bridges and culverts were destroyed. All the Mongol army found was a dead city, a deserted city amidst fire and smoke. Meanwhile, the entire main force of Viet had retreated in an organized manner, spreading out across the mountainous areas of the northeast, the river delta, and the rugged midlands. Specifically, the forces of Tran Quoc Tuan, Tran Quang Kai, and Tran Hat Hiu were deployed in the forest areas of Pu Nin, Tam Dao, Tai Nguyen, Tuyen Quang to organize small troops using guerrilla tactics, attacking quickly and withdrawing, destroying the logistics and communications of the Yuan army. Along the banks of the Red River, Kao River, Duong River, light naval teams continuously attacked transport routes and pontoon bridges, cutting off the supply route from Thanglong to the north. The riverside villages became a logistical support network for the Tran army, disguised as civilians but being communication stations and guerrilla food depots. The Yuan army, accustomed to winning wars quickly, defeating the enemy in a single battle, now fell into a war of attrition without end. They could neither advance nor retreat. They did not know who they were fighting, because the enemy was not visible on the battlefield, but was hidden in every bamboo grove, every forest, every riverbank. The peasants in plain clothes, holding homemade spears, had transformed into ghosts in the mountains and forests, causing hundreds of small cuts to the army that had once spread terror from Asia to Europe. From the Kao River area to the routes connecting Thanglong, Langsun, the Mongol supply convoys were constantly sabotaged by local militia and people. The logistics system collapsed and food was exhausted. Meanwhile, the hot, humid climate of the south and disease became the allies of the Vietnamese. Malaria, dysentery, lack of clean water, and lack of grass for horses caused tens of thousands of Mongol war horses to collapse in the mud. Morale plummeted, and the ranks were in disarray. Even the most battle-hardened army could not fight its exhaustion. By early February 1258, after only 1 month of occupying Thang Long, Urarganda Dai, realizing that it could not hold out for long, was forced to order a withdrawal. The invading army quietly retreated through the northwest back to Yunnan, following the route along the Da River, Muang Lo, then around Dien Bien, to return to Kunming. On the way to retreat, they were constantly counterattacked by guerrillas, small-scale raids, and harassed by the Dai Viet army and people. The blade of war was no longer on the battlefield, but in small ambushes, in surprise attacks in the middle of the forest at night. After the victory, the Tran court did not rush to celebrate the victory or show off its strength. Instead, a diplomatic delegation was sent to the UN court, bringing gentle words, friendly gifts, and the cold composure of those who had just passed the blade of death. It was a diplomatic gesture to appease the anger of Kublai Khan, the Great Khan, who was not used to hearing the word defeat. An act that seemed humble, like bowing his head. Tran Han Tong once said, "If the enemy retreats and we are not skillful, I fear that the source of disaster will come from words, not from swords." That was when the Vietnamese learned how to win not only on the battlefield, but also on the political chessboard, where sometimes a timely word can save a generation from bloodshed. As soon as the two UN armies, one from the north through Lang Son, the other from the south by sea through Champa, began to tighten their grip on Dai Viet, the Tran Dynasty quickly convened and organized a nationwide resistance. Tran Hung Dao took full control of military strategy, advocating not to deploy troops to fight early, but to prolong the time to wear down the enemy's strength, divide the armies, and wait for the opportunity to counterattack. In December 1284, the northern army led by Thoat Hoan crossed the Chi Lang Pass and entered Lang Son. Meanwhile, the southern army led by Dadu crossed the Champa, entered Nghe An, Than Hoa, and then followed the river to approach the plains. In early 1285, the Dai Viet battle entered its most tense phase. On the one hand, they had to tactically retreat to preserve their forces. On the other hand, they had to divide their troops to block and hold back both attacks. In February 1285, the Yuan army entered Thang Long almost without any obstacles. The Tran army proactively withdrew from the capital, taking all their provisions and troops, leaving behind an empty city. It seemed like a victory, but in fact, it was a trap that dragged on and exhausted the enemy's strength. For many months after that, Thoat Hoan stationed his troops in Thang Long, but could not stabilize the logistics. This army was cut off from the supply line from the north, and the communication line with the Toa Do route in the south encountered guerrillas and small but continuous interceptions. Tran Dynasty generals such as Tran Nhat Duat, Tran Quoc Tuan, Pham Ngu Lao, and Tran Quang Khai, each commanding a direction, continuously cut off the enemy's logistical lines, at the same time encouraging the people to rise everywhere. In the mountains, along the dikes, along the rivers, across the plains, small groups of insurgents turned Dai Viet into a giant asymmetrical battlefield where the Yuan army could not find support. After Dadu was destroyed at Ham Tu, the southern army almost disintegrated. But some of the remaining troops still tried to go upstream to the north to find a way to join forces with Thoat Hoan. They were ambushed again at Tai Ket around the end of May to the beginning of June 1285. This was a large river port in the present-day Hungyen region, and was where the waterway between the north and the south intersected. The Tran army, under the command of Tran Quang Kai, proactively intercepted, arranged naval forces on both banks of the river, and ambushed when the enemy boats entered the narrow river. Fire attacks, crossbows, and underground stakes were used to block the retreat route. As a result, the entire remaining army of Toa Do was completely destroyed. The fall of Tai Ket left Thoat Hoan with no hope of reinforcements from the south. After the successive victories at Ham Tu, Chuang Duong, and Tai Ket, the Tran army had enough forces and battle formation to organize a large-scale counterattack to retake Thang Long. Around mid-June 1285, the Dai Viet army organized a general attack on the capital from 3 directions: from the south across the Red River, from the northwest along the Tulich River, and from the northeast approaching through the forest. The recapture battle was fierce. Thoat Hoan, already bewildered after a series of defeats, did not have enough strength to resist. The Yuan army fled Thang Long in chaos. This was a victory of great symbolic significance, not only because it recaptured the capital, but also because it affirmed that the initiative had completely belonged to Dai Viet. Thoat Hoan withdrew to the Van Keep base, which was the initial assembly point, to await orders from the UN court or supplies. But this place was no longer safe. During the last days of June and the first days of July 1285, the Tran army continuously attacked the food warehouses, communication stations, and supply stations around Van Keep, causing the enemy to fall into a desperate situation. Under pressure from many directions, Thoat Hoan was forced to order a retreat to the border through Lang Son. But this was not an orderly retreat, but a hellish escape. On the way back, the Yuan army had to cross dense forests, high mountains, dangerous passes, with dozens of ambushes of the Dai Viet army. Poisoned arrows, forest traps, and local militias constantly appeared. Thoat Hoan was wounded. His spirit was so panicked that he had to crawl into a copper tube to avoid the poisoned arrows, an image of ultimate humiliation. Soldiers died along the way like straw, corpses piled up in layers, leaving behind a path of blood and defeat. After destroying the food fleet commanded by Truong Van Ho in the Van Don Sea area at the end of December of the year Din Hoi, early 1288, the famous general Tran Con Du quickly reported the victory to the court. This attack was not just a simple victory, but a fatal blow to the lungs of the entire invasion campaign, the logistics system. From Guangzhou, Truong Van Ho commanded hundreds of warships carrying military supplies, food, and equipment, going around Hainan Island, following the coast to Van Don. Here, the Dai Viet Navy team had been lying in wait for many days, choosing the moment when the fleet entered shallow waters with reefs to suddenly attack. Truong Van Ho lost his life, and the food was destroyed. From that moment on, the entire counterattack plan of the Tran dynasty began to be deployed in a comprehensively suppressive manner. The Yuan army, although still in control of human resources, was pushed into a dead-end situation. At this time, Thoat Hoan continued to command the army. From the Tu Minh region, Guangxi, through Nam Quan, passed through Lang Son, advanced deep along the Luk Nam, Pha Lai route, then flooded down to the Midland of the North. In the west, Ao Lo Shich advanced in the direction of Cao Bang, Tai Nguyen. From the east, the navy led by Oma Ni and Phan Thiep landed through the Van Don seaport, joined forces in the Ha Long, Dong Trieu region, and advanced straight along the Kin Thai, Duong, Ni Ha River axis into Thang Long. In January 1288, all three forces joined forces in the Gia Lam, Ko Loa region and quickly captured the capital. But Thang Long at that time was an abandoned city. The Yuan Dynasty, along with all provisions, manpower, and resources, had been evacuated in advance. Unable to establish a coordination center and without domestic logistics, Thoat Hoan fell into a dilemma. In a state of severe food shortage, the Yuan army was forced to divide its troops into small groups, dispersed throughout the northern delta, such as Khoichao, Dongtriu, Jialam, Haiduang, to loot and plunder food. But that action opened up a golden opportunity for the Dai Viet army. From the base in the Thien Truong, Tukmak area, Nam Dinh, Tran Hung Dao ordered his generals to deploy the empty garden and empty house battle formation, and at the same time use the oil-stained guerrilla tactic. Light combat-ready troops were deployed throughout the north, from the mountainous Yen the region to the central region of San Te, continuously raided the logistics stations, ambushed the troops going to get food, and cut off communication with the rear. During February to March 1288, the Yuan army was continuously attacked by surprise day and night, from the ground and on the river. They could not advance, but could not retreat either. Meanwhile, Tran Quang Kai was assigned to control the Than Hoa, Nghean area, the southern defense line, to prevent the enemy from attacking from Champa or the Ngang Pass area. Tran Hat Duat commanded the Yen Bai, Tuyen Quang defense line, preventing the invasion of Aulosich from the west. The reasonable division of labor and the connection from the central court to the battlefields helped the entire Dai Viet battle formation operate like an intelligent machine. By March 1288, Thoat Hoan was forced to plan a retreat, but the retreat route was no longer intact. The infantry unit he commanded wanted to retreat via Lang Sun, but was fiercely blocked at Dongbo Dao, a strategic position on the east bank of the Red River, near the mouth of the Tu Lich River flowing into Nhi Ha. Here, the Dai Viet army arranged two defense clusters, one on the other side of the river, one in the dense forest, conducting daily sniping attacks. Thoat Hoan's infantry was bogged down in the middle of the flood season, lacking food and being intercepted, forced to abandon heavy artillery, split into small groups, and crawl through the forest and over the pass to find a way to escape. Meanwhile, the Yuan Mongol Navy in the Luk Dao Dong Triu area could no longer maintain its formation when news of Truong Van Ho's defeat spread. Oman Ni and Phan Thiep were forced to decide to withdraw by water. They gathered all the remaining warships in the Dabak River area. Then from there followed the Jia River, entering Bach Dang, hoping to follow the Dai Than Nam Trio estuary to Ha Long Bay to return to the Yuan land. But this journey was completely in the hands of Tran Hung Dao. He and generals such as Vu Duc Tuan, Pham Nhu Lao, Nguyen Khoi, had previously stationed troops at Tan Mai Beach, Rung Wharf, Chan River estuary, and established a headquarters in the Trang Ken Lu Kiem area, present-day Haiphong, controlling the entire water and tides on the Bach Dang River. Thousands of sharpened wooden stakes, tipped with iron at the ends, were driven deep into the riverbed in a continuous fan shape. The positions of the stake fields were arranged according to hydrology, taking full advantage of the ebb and flow of the tide. When the tide rose, everything was hidden under the water, leaving only the calm river, and when the tide receded, that was when hell emerged. Tran Hung Dao advocated attacking at that exact moment. Around the beginning of the fourth lunar month of the year Mao Tai, around the end of April in the solar calendar in 1288, when the Yuan Navy began to move on the Bach Dang River, the tide rose, and the entire stake field had not yet been revealed. The Dai Viet army at that time only appeared sporadically, creating a feeling of weakness, as if wanting to avoid confrontation. That was what made Omani subjective, letting his ships go deep into the middle of the river. When the fleet had entered the Bach Dang stake area, from Nam Trio Gate to Rung Wharf, the tide began to recede. The sharp stakes rose, stabbed into the bottom of the boats, overturned and collided, causing the fleet to be in chaos. The Mongol navy, which had once been rampant from Dai Kim to Dai Li, was now in chaos, no longer able to command. At that moment, Tran Hung Dao ordered a general attack. From both sides of the river, small mobile boats of the Dai Viet army rushed out like waves. Fire was thrown, arrows were shot, and spears pierced through steel armor. The Mongol Yuan fleet was broken into pieces, scattered on the blood-red water. Screams rang out, the sound of boats hitting stakes, the sound of the enemy shouting to escape blended into the tragic music of a fateful battle. Omani was captured alive. Fan Tiep died in battle. Ao Lo Shich was lost. The entire fleet was almost destroyed. With no hope left, Thoat Hoan, who was still hiding in the mountainous region of Langsun, was completely desperate when he heard the news of defeat. He left the remnants of his army behind, fled through the forest himself, and crossed the border back to the north in humiliation. The 1288 campaign ended not only with a military defeat of the Yuan Mongol, but also with the complete disintegration of the will to invade. The expeditionary army, once known as Invincible, was defeated by a small country with intelligence, people's hearts, and understanding of the terrain. The Battle of Bach Dang was not only a victory, but a clear declaration that Dai Viet was a land that could not be invaded. After this defeat, Kublai Khan never launched another campaign to the south. Although the Yuan Empire still existed for more than half a century, from the moment the wooden stake rose in the middle of Bach Dang, its prestige began to crack. And in the memory of an entire nation, the year 1288 will always be the year when a small river buried an entire heroic army. Dai Viet not only won but also shattered a myth. The myth that the Mongols could not be defeated. That victory resounded like a wake-up call for all of Asia. In Japan, the emperor refused to pay tribute, lighting the fire of resistance that led to 2 kamikaze storms that shattered the Yuan dream. In Java and the Southeast Asian kingdoms, the Dai Viet spirit became living proof that the Mongol Empire could also lose, if you knew how to fight as a nation, not just an army. And that's the end of today's episode. If you feel your heart pounding when listening to heroic songs like Bach Dang, where sharp stakes and waves knock down the hooves of invading horses, and if you believe that history is not just the past, but a torch lighting the way for the future, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. There are still many classic battles, from Thermopylae to Tours, from Hastings to Agincourt, from Manzikert to Bach Dang, where human will overcame fate, where blood and iron wrote the destiny of nations, waiting for you and me to discover. With your companionship, no legend would be forgotten.